Hello and welcome back. This is James Nussbaumer, author of The Master of Everything, a story of mankind and the world of illusion we call life. Now we are going to enter part 7 of the book called Grandeur or Grandiosity, and we will begin with chapter 25, titled The Grandiosity of the Ego. One of the many things A Course in Miracles has done for me is to open my eyes to all the nothingness that consumed much of my life and the little tricks the ego uses to guide me toward the grand promises it cannot fulfill. How could it? For the ego is a false image. Now it's easy for me to see that the grandest the ego could ever be is grandiose. Grandiosity is the ego's limited kingdom. Grandiosity is expressed in competitiveness. It's pompous. It always involves attack, and it attacks out its pompous and exaggerated form of importance or dignity. Its goal is always about outdoing, but never undoing. In its attempts to win at all costs, the ego will vacillate between suspiciousness and viciousness, getting nowhere. Even at the slightest presence of the real side of your split mind, however, where you display the grandeur, that is your state of grace, the ego in you automatically feels abandoned. The ego becomes threatened by how meaningless it finds itself when it looks at the grandeur of God that you are. The ego believes it must somehow retaliate and will attempt to offer gifts to induce you to return to the ego for safety. The ego continues to remain vigilant and suspicious, especially when a part of you seems to be trying to figure things out. This frightens the ego, and it shifts to viciousness when you calmly decide not to tolerate its abuse. It then makes efforts for its own relief, whereby you begin berating yourself. Have you ever called yourself an idiot, or possibly worse, for something stupid you felt that you did? Well, let me tell you, I sure have. Have you ever set your mind on doing something magnificent, something you have always dreamed of doing? How about something such as writing a book? Then, possibly, you put it off by saying, one of these days I will write that book. You may even add to the comfort of your procrastination by saying, but when I do write that book, it will be a bestseller. Well, maybe the day finally does come around, and when you have the momentum to get started, but you begin telling yourself that you'll only be making a fool of yourself. How many times have you done any of this about any type of project or goal? Think about it. Additionally, how many times did you ever really end up making a fool of yourself? Well, probably hardly ever, if at all. But you'll surely be jealous of the ones without any announcements that did go ahead and write their book or follow their bliss. Next, the ego may say or think something like, well, if I really set my mind to it, I surely could write an even better book. Does any of this sound even slightly familiar? Even if you find your way through the ego's obstacles and finally do start your project, you may start hearing voices in your head, such as, you idiot, who do you think you are to write a book and host lectures around the world? With that, the ego continues, what in the world qualifies you as an expert to write a book about spirituality? Well, the ego is not done yet. You went to prison, you idiot, and that alone makes you a loser. And if that's not enough, do you realize that what a fool you will look like when nobody cares to read your book, let alone purchase it? What publisher in their right mind would take an interest in what you have to say? Ouch! Wow! Did I ever belittle myself here or what? Well, by now you should be able to see that in this case, my ego was begging me to crawl back to it where I can feel safe. Need I say that my own spiritual flashlight gets quite a bit of use? But not to worry, the batteries in your own spiritual flashlight will never die because its power to shine light has an eternal source. We've all heard it before and have seen it written repeatedly. You are what you think. A Course in Miracles takes this a bit deeper, actually much deeper, by teaching what you are is unaffected by your thoughts, but what you look upon is their direct result. Now we're going to go into chapter 26, titled The Grandeur of God, which you are. When we can sense ourselves as being the magnificent grandeur of God, which is untouchable by anything outside of God, we then carry with us the radiance of grandeur. Grandeur is something real and is not flaunted. Grandeur shines, but when we walk around in a boastful, arrogant, false self, high on our body's achievements, with promises or maybe even threats of more achievements, we're on a grandiose fishing trip using a lure that catches just more ego. The ego can never understand the difference between grandeur and its own grandiosity, because it sees only images that it wishes to project for personal gain and adoration, whereas grandeur portrays inward beauty and exemplifies pure joy. The projections of the ego lead to attack now or a scheme to attack later. The grandiose simply cannot understand God's grandeur because grandeur sets us free. The ego doesn't want us to be free. Please keep in mind, I am talking about the grandiosity and grandeur that is in each one of us. So other egos outside yourself will also sense the grandeur that you are and will immediately warn others that you are insane or that you are in denial, which is a big one, because you are not seeing reality, they may think. Does this denial thing sound familiar? It always seems we are accused of being in denial when we go against the grain, so to speak. Have you noticed this? But other egos are correct, and your grandeur certainly is in denial. The grandeur that you are is in denial of the illusions projected by the world's ego and knows that true reality within and does not need to be boastful or pompous or demanding. The ego's grandiosity is a common obstacle in the jealousy-guarded relationships between a man and a woman, or in the love-hate battle. I remember issues with a woman I was deeply involved with for many years, where I was often accused of being involved with other women, which was absurd. It seems that when she was a child, her own father confessed not only to her mother, but to the entire large family that he was having an affair with another woman. This tore the family apart, and sure enough, the marriage ended in divorce. The family split apart in the days when divorce was shameful and not nearly as popular as accepted as today. It humiliated the children, especially among their friends. I was able to understand this myself because I can remember this same thing happening to a friend of mine's parents when I was growing up in the 1960s. There would be times in my relationship with this woman when I would work long hours or choose to be alone or maybe go out with a few of my male friends. At times when I was away from her, her fears and insecurities led her to think I was with another woman. It got to a point where she would follow me around to places where I would meet with my friends. After several episodes of our bickering over this ridiculous assumption, I became defensive to a point where I realized that this had to stop. I simply decided I no longer needed to defend myself and remained quiet while she grilled me. I would try to overlook her behavior by considering its source. The more I remained defenseless, the more she would become emotionally upset and suspicious. Back then, of course, I wasn't able to see this dance for what it was. But somehow, Some of the times I seemed to know what to do to calm her fears. Nonetheless, we engaged in a vicious circle. Once her accusations would start up and sooner or later run out of steam, she would then turn back toward more suspicion. Of course, I was no angel myself, in that I, too, would start to become suspicious of her ulterior motives, if any. And I may have went overboard about ulterior motives I thought she had that she really didn't have. Rather than understand that space and time might have helped her to sort this out, my own ego would become defensive when faced with her unjust attacks, and the result would be an ongoing battle between both of our egos. We accomplished nothing other than to increase distrust with one another and increase doubt and fear within each other, hiding out until the next time our separate egos would privately simmer, building grounds for the next grandiose event, or should I say, defense. A Course in Miracles teaches that from your grandeur you can bless, because your grandeur is your abundance. What does it really mean to bless? In the example here of my past relationship, to bless might have meant allowing my grandeur to be touched by her grandeur, or for mine to touch hers. In this way, we can bless each other. Neither party needs to be aware of what's happening. If I can recognize the grandeur in her, a blessing has been made. We do this by holding it in our minds and keeping our vision whole as we overlook illusory behavior. In other words, I could have said to her, "Honey, you are mistaken about what you are accusing me of, and I do understand your concern. Please believe me when I say there are so many lovely things I see in you." Once this gesture is given from the heart, be done with it, and if necessary, leave the scene temporarily, allowing her time and space to absorb the forgiving words, which is healing time. When we bless, we are simply extending our love. Would I like to try that relationship over again? You answer that question. Or let me say, would I like to try on this exercise over again? But that's another part of the ego, wanting to go back in time in the past and saying, "Oh, I'd like to try that over again," but that's not possible. So back to grandeur again. Grandeur is about pure truth. Truth does not get suspicious, nor does it become vicious. Truth, being what it is, cannot vacillate. How can oneness vacillate between something other than being at one? It is very easy to distinguish grandeur from grandiosity, because love is returned and pride is not. Consider a clear night when you are enjoying the stars and the full harvest moon in a calm sky. Do you cover your eyes? Do you cover your eyes to shield the splendor? Of course not. You accept the beauty for what it is. But since the beauty of the star-filled sky is merely your separated mind projecting an image while you dream of life, the starry sky itself cannot possibly be the grandeur you sense. No, not the starry sky in its physical, material sense. The grandeur is within the splendor of your real mind, which is reflecting the image of the night sky. Does that make sense? In other words, your dream-filled mind may very well see the stars and the moon and all its glory, but the real unseparated you beholds the grandeur that the dream portrays. In other words, we can say a sweet dream. Anyone who dreams of love will be drawn to grandeur, which has no need to hold pride. Only love and good can result from grandeur, because if there is no love, there can be no good. We see this represented symbolically in The Wizard of Oz once again, where Dorothy could not have ever awakened out of the dream of Oz if her good and loving home in Kansas were unreal. The Holy Spirit will only recognize what is real, which is our God-given grandeur. And it is an extension of God. He gave us this real value. We did not proclaim or establish it falsely, like the charlatan Wizard of Oz did. Our grandeur needs no defense, nor does it need a curtain to hide behind. Grandiosity is no match for who we truly are. The grandeur in us could care less for grandiosity. Is it arrogant to recognize and radiate our grandeur, you might ask? The ego thinks it is, but our grandeur is what it is. To accept ourselves as God created, we cannot be arrogant. Rather, it is the denial of arrogance. But to accept the ego is being arrogant, because it means that you believe yourself to be truer than God. Thank you for listening. And in the next session, we will enter chapter 27.